They're chosen ones. They thought you were last, but God put you there for a reason. Have you ever looked around at your life and wondered why it feels like you're behind everyone else? Like somehow you missed the train, the opportunity, the moment you were supposed to rise? You see people you grew up with achieving more, getting recognition, living in the spotlight, while you're still fighting battles in the dark no one even knows you're facing. And it's easy, dangerously easy, to start believing the lie that you're not enough, that you're last, that maybe you were forgotten. But what if I told you you weren't forgotten at all? What if I told you that you were placed there on purpose, in the shadows, in the struggle, in the silence, because God was preparing something bigger than anything the spotlight could ever give you? You see, chosen ones are rarely chosen in public. They're chosen in private, in quiet, in pain. Their calling doesn't begin when the world sees them, it begins when the world ignores them. And this is the part no one talks about. That divine purpose often disguises itself as delay. That sacred positioning often looks like rejection, because the truth is, if you're truly chosen, your path won't look like anyone else's. It'll be harder, it'll be lonelier, and it'll make less sense to people around you. But that's not because you've been overlooked, it's because you've been set apart.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
There's a reason you feel things deeper than most. There's a reason you've carried wounds that no one else could see. There's a reason you've always sensed that you didn't quite belong here. It's because you were never meant to blend in. You weren't built for average. You weren't wired for shallow. You were designed to go through things most people couldn't survive, so you could carry wisdom most people will never touch. That's the weight of being chosen. That's the cost of being called. But let's be real. Being last doesn't feel divine when you're in it. It feels like punishment. It feels like failure. It feels like something is wrong with you. And in those moments, we start to question everything. Why am I still struggling? Why am I invisible? Why does it feel like everyone else is getting ahead while I'm stuck in the same place? But what if the place you're stuck in is actually sacred ground? What if the very delay you're resenting is the cocoon God is using to transform you? Think about it. Every seed begins in darkness. Every diamond is formed under pressure. Every masterpiece starts as a mess. So why would your story be any different? The problem is, we measure progress by visibility. We think we're growing only when others can see it. But real growth, spiritual growth, happens in the unseen. In the nights you didn't give up. In the tears no one saw. In the prayers you whispered when your voice was trembling. That's where the becoming happens. That's where God does His deepest work, not in the stage lights, but in the shadows. And maybe that's why it had to be you. Maybe that's why the path was so quiet, so painful, so hidden. Because God needed someone who wouldn't collapse under the weight of the calling, someone who wouldn't be destroyed by the spotlight, someone who would remember where they came from when everyone else forgot. You weren't put last to be humiliated. You were put last so you could rise with humility, so you could rise with depth, so you could rise with the kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through fire. But here's the real question. Can you trust the process even when you don't understand the timing? Can you stay faithful even when it feels unfair? Can you believe that your current invisibility is not a sign of insignificance, but a setup for something sacred? These are not easy answers. But chosen ones aren't called to easy lives, they're called to meaningful ones. And sometimes meaning has to be forged in places no one else sees. Let me ask you something you may have never dared to ask yourself. What if being last was the only way God could make sure you didn't lose yourself? What if being hidden was the only way He could protect you from the noise, the comparison, the shallow praise that poisons so many rising souls? You were never meant to be a copy of someone else's success. You were meant to be a revelation, something the world has never seen before. And revelations take time. So if you feel like you're behind, let me remind you, you are not late. You are not lesser. You are not forgotten. You are in training. You are in alignment. You are in preparation. And God doesn't prepare what He doesn't plan to use. Every tear, every failure, every closed door has been part of the architecture of your rise. And when the moment comes, and it will come, no one will be able to deny that it was divine, because they'll remember where you came from. They'll remember who doubted you, who overlooked you, who said you were too quiet, too broken, too slow. And they'll watch in awe as you rise, not out of revenge, but out of revelation. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove that God was right. You were never last, you were being positioned. And the place they left you to rot is the very ground where your roots went deep. So when you rise, you won't just rise tall, you'll rise unshakable. From rejection to revelations, why your setbacks were secret initiations. There's a hidden language to rejection that only the chosen ones eventually learn to translate. At first, it sounds like the echo of failure. It feels like doors slamming shut, people turning away, opportunities vanishing just when they seemed within reach. But if you stay long enough in that silence, if you sit with the sting without running, something begins to shift. You begin to realize that what you thought was rejection was actually redirection. What you thought was abandonment was an anointing in disguise. And those setbacks, they weren't punishments, they were initiations. Silent, sacred, and designed specifically for the calling on your life. You see, when you are truly chosen, your life will not move in straight lines. It will not follow the timeline society tells you to chase, because while others are being prepared for success, you are being prepared for impact. And impact requires a deeper level of training. It requires you to go through things most wouldn't survive, not because God wants to see you suffer, but because He needs you to carry something different, something heavier, something holier. And that kind of weight demands a level of spiritual muscle that can only be built in the gym of rejection. Think about it. How many times did you think, why did they leave me? Why didn't I get that job? Why did that dream die right when it felt alive? And later, sometimes months, sometimes years, you realized that if you had received what you wanted when you wanted it, it would have either destroyed you or distracted you from what was really meant for you. The people who walked away weren't rejecting you, they were making space for a line. The opportunities that ghosted you weren't losses, they were detours from paths that would dimmed your light. The doors that wouldn't open weren't broken, they were divinely locked to protect your destiny. But you can't see this when you're still bleeding. You can't feel this when the silence is screaming louder than your faith. That's why many chosen ones give up in the hallway between the door that closed and the one that hasn't yet opened. That's where the test is. That's where the initiation begins, God doesn't just want to bless you, He wants to build you. Because if you don't become the person who can carry the blessing will crush you. So, when you feel like you're being broken, remember, you're really being built. And here's the sacred truth hidden in plain sight. Rejection forces you to go inward. It forces you to ask questions you would have never asked if everything had gone according to plan. It strips away the illusions, the noise, the external validation, and it brings you face to face with the only thing that's real: your soul, your essence, your unshakable connection with the divine. That's why chosen ones are often isolated before they're elevated, because the isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the sacred space where God rewires your spirit, redefines your identity, and reconstructs your vision. But here's the part that most people miss. When you finally understand that rejection is an initiation, you stop fighting it. You stop begging for the past to come back. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who were never assigned to recognize it. You stop chasing validation and start flowing in revelation. And revelation changes everything, because it shows you that you are not missing out. You are being moved into alignment, moved into purpose, moved into the version of you that was always meant to rise. So let me ask you something that might shift the way you see your entire life. What if your setbacks weren't setbacks at all? What if they were secret ceremonies designed by God to initiate you into your next level of power? How would you carry your pain differently if you knew it was a doorway? How would you walk through disappointment if you understood it as divine choreography? Rejection feels personal until you realize it's spiritual. And once you see that, you stop taking it as an insult and start treating it as an instruction. Every no becomes a compass. Every closed door becomes a redirect sign. Every betrayal becomes a push into deeper destiny. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances. You see yourself as a vessel being shaped by the Creator. And that shift in perspective is where your power begins to rise. Because here's the truth. They thought you were last because they didn't see the training. They didn't see the nights you cried out for direction. They didn't see the strength you built in silence. They didn't see the spiritual warfare you endured just to keep going. But God saw it all. And God was using every single rejection as a tool to sculpt you, to sanctify you, to prepare you for a stage no one else is qualified to stand on. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are being forged. And when the time comes, when you emerge from this process, you won't just walk into rooms, you'll shift the atmosphere. You won't just speak, you'll awaken, because you'll know something most people never learn, that rejection is not the end, it's the beginning of revelation. When God hides you, the sacred power of being invisible before your rise, there's a strange kind of ache that comes with invisibility. It's not loud, it doesn't scream, it lingers in the quiet moments. When you post something from your heart and no one responds, when you give your all but go unacknowledged, when you show up with pure intentions and still feel unseen. For chosen ones, this ache is deeply familiar. You've probably felt it more times than you can count. And each time it stings a little deeper, because a part of you knows how much light is inside you, how much love, how much wisdom, how much power, and yet the world seems to walk right past you as if you're invisible. But what if I told you that you're not being ignored, You're being hidden, and not just hidden by chance, but hidden by God. This is one of the most misunderstood stages of the chosen one's journey. People think that if they're not seen, they must not matter, that if they're not elevated, they must not be worthy. But that's not how divine timing works. God doesn't place chosen ones in the spotlight until they've been fully prepared in the shadows, because the deeper the purpose, the longer the hiding. The more powerful the mission, the more sacred the cocoon. You are not invisible because you're unimportant. You are invisible because you are being formed. You see, when God hides you, it's not to punish you, it's to protect you. To protect you from premature exposure, to protect you from influence that could poison your purity, to protect you from platforms your character isn't ready to uphold, because visibility without foundation is dangerous. Elevation without depth is fragile. You don't build a skyscraper without digging deep, and you can't carry divine impact until your roots are anchored in something unshakable. So the hiding, it's holy. The silence, it's strategic. The delay, it's divine. But let's not pretend it's easy. It's hard to stay faithful when you feel forgotten. It's hard to keep showing up when it seems like no one notices. It's hard to keep pouring from your soul when the world offers no validation. But this is where your spiritual muscles are built. This is where your ego dies and your essence rises. Because when you keep showing up in the absence of applause, you begin to realize something profound. You weren't doing it for the crowd, you were doing it for the calling. And that shift changes everything. You stop chasing visibility and start cultivating presence. You stop performing and start embodying. You stop trying to be seen and start seeing. You begin to notice the details others miss. You hear the whispers behind the noise. You sense the invisible movements of spirit guiding your every step. And in that quiet place, something sacred begins to happen. You start to become the person your future needs. Let me ask you something that very few people ever ask themselves. Can you be trusted with power if you still crave attention? Can you be trusted with influence if you need applause to feel whole? Can you steward a kingdom if you still operate from a place of lack? These are the questions God asks in the hiding. These are the tests only silence can reveal. Because it's easy to look pure in the spotlight, it's easy to sound wise on a stage. But who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when nothing's working? That's who you really are. And that's who God is shaping in the shadows. So, if you're in the season of hiding, don't rush it. Don't try to escape it. Don't mistake it for delay or rejection. This is sacred ground. This is where your anointing is marinating. This is where your vision is being refined. This is where God is building the version of you that can actually handle what you're praying for. Because He's not just trying to give you success, He's preparing you for sustainability. The world is obsessed with going viral, but God is obsessed with going eternal. That's why He hides you. That's why He slows you down. That's why He strips away everything that doesn't align with your soul. Because when He finally reveals you, it won't just be a moment, it'll be a movement. And you won't rise fragile. You'll rise fortified. You won't rise for applause, you'll rise for impact. Because now, you're not rising for validation, you're rising for assignment. So the next time you feel overlooked, remember, silence is not absence, hiddenness is not abandonment. You are not being punished, you are being prepared, and when the time comes, the very people who overlooked you will wonder how you rose so fast, how your voice carries so much weight, how your presence shifts rooms. And they won't realize that while they were watching the highlight reels of others, you were in the secret place, being shaped, being sharpened, being sent. The great reversal, how God lifts the last and turns obscurity into glory. There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one when everything that once seemed upside down suddenly turns right side up. It's not always loud, and it usually doesn't happen the way you imagined, but it happens. The great reversal. The moment when the ones who are overlooked, underestimated, and left behind are suddenly brought to the front, not because they pushed their way there, but because they were placed there by divine hands. And when it happens, it doesn't just surprise the world, it humbles it. You see, God has always had a pattern of choosing the ones the world would never pick. The last-born, the shepherd boy, the rejected woman, the exiled prophet, the people who didn't look the part, didn't speak the part, didn't feel like they belonged in any spotlight. And yet, those are the ones God consistently raises. Why? Because when God lifts someone who was last, no one can claim it was favoritism, networking, or luck. They have to admit it was divine. You may have spent years wondering why you were always counted out, why your name was never called, why your gifts were ignored while others were praised. But what if that was all part of a divine setup? What if obscurity was the soil where your greatness was being rooted? What if being last wasn't a delay but a positioning? So that when the reversal came, it would be clear that it wasn't by your hand but by God's. The reversal doesn't just elevate you, it vindicates you. It shows that every tear had purpose, that every silent season had meaning, that every no was really a not yet. And here's the most powerful part. When God lifts you, He lifts everything connected to you. Your voice, your influence, your message, your mission. What was once hidden becomes a beacon. What was once ignored becomes impossible to overlook. But this isn't about revenge. It's not about proving people wrong. It's about proving that God was right all along. It's about stepping into your purpose, not with pride, but with presence, not to dominate, but to serve. Because chosen ones don't rise to be worshipped, they rise to awaken, to break chains, to speak truth, to carry light where others only see darkness. And here's something you need to hear. When the reversal comes, don't shrink. Don't play small. Don't apologize for being chosen. You've already paid the price in silence, in isolation, in obedience. You've already gone through the fire. You've already passed the tests no one saw. So when the doors open, walk through them boldly. Not to impress, but to impact. Not to perform, but to embody. Let me ask you something personal. What if your whole life has been a setup for this moment? What if the pain, the delay, the hiding was all leading here, not to a stage, but to significance? Are you ready to carry what you are created to carry? Are you ready to rise with integrity, with humility, with power that comes from God, not just for God? This is your time, not because you forced it, but because you became it. You became the version of you that could hold the weight of the calling. You became the vessel strong enough to pour into others. And now, you don't just step into destiny, you embody it. You live it. Every room you enter, every life you touch, every word you speak carries the frequency of someone who was last but not forgotten, hidden but never lost, rejected but revered by the one who matters most. This is the great reversal, and your time has come. Walk in it, rise in it, lead in it. The world needs what you've carried in silence for so long. Now is the time to speak it, live it, and be it, for the glory of the one who always knew the last shall be first. And you were chosen for this.